got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Ministry of Truth. I am Javi, your number one host on this platform. Not this platform, but yeah. So while I'm going to continue getting ready, we're going to sit back and chill for about 2 minutes and 52 seconds because I got a lot to go over with today. It's 7 different candidates, and we're all going to be on the same stage tomorrow. Before we get that, we got to get it loosened up, a little relaxed, mellow. But you know what? We could also do with a little humor. This song is called Rich Folks from a Rich Town, and you might know the singer. The singer is a well-known House Speaker. Let's see what she's got to say.
The United Spot. I've been selling my socks, drinking all day, lots of ice cream and milk champagne, so I can sit out here getting richer every day. Ignoring my district while you do what I say, and let your damn say. What Trump shows you, the people like me, and peasants like you, if we don't lock him up and make him go away. But he won't, no he won't, living in a mad world with no control. We better do something cause the shit's in low. I just want all the power and all the control. It's got a training and climate control. And you don't think I'm watching, but the joke is on you. And your rights don't mean shit cause you're standing all day. You'll do what you do, but you'll do what I say. Living in corruption world, you have no control. I tell you what to do, and you do what you're told. And it's a damn shame what Trump told you to people like me.
All right, like I said, we're going to go over, it's 7 candidates. Senator Hutchinson, I forgot where the fucking state he's from. Christie, obviously, you know where that fat fuck from New Jersey. You got the North Dakota governor, Doug Burgum. Never heard of this guy, so it's going to be interesting. Got Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, and Tim Scott. I think I put them in order of who is least likely to get elected to most likely get elected. But as you know, Donald Trump's not going to be there. He already has a pre-recorded thing that he did. And hello, Nunya. Pre-recorded thing that. Oh, wait, let me make sure I'm getting the right run. That they're going to air simultaneously. I don't really know where because I know this is a Rumble Fox News exclusive tomorrow, which is great because I can actually record it off Rumble. But anyway, obviously I said from best to last, or last to best, worst to best. So first one we got, obviously, is it was kind of a hard decision. Oh, shit. I put it on the wrong one, guys. I actually put Christie above this guy. So, you guys may know this man. He's a former vice president, not named Joe Biden, and he's a piece of shit. And wait till you hear what he's got to say about America, because it's not his problem, not his concern.
President, for coming.
You bet. Thank you, Tucker.
So great.
How about a round of applause for Tucker Carlson for being here and doing this, everybody?
The only
I thought I was going to get off easy. I got on stage, there was no Tucker. So
You know, there's a recession when one of us doesn't have a job. It's me.
Uh-oh.
that would actually be two of us, Tucker.
Actually, I'll start there. Are we in a recession?
You know, I think there's a real possibility.
It's weird to see this guy as vice president of the United States at one point, but
I mean, look,
he seems like he's so nervous.
Joe Biden comes into office, and along with Democrat majorities in House and Senate.
And why did he choose to get a
they
handheld
launched a
microphone?
gusher of spending, $2 trillion in unnecessary spending that initiated the worst inflation in 40 years. They launched a war on energy. They dismantled all of our successful policies at the border, created the worst border crisis in history. And the reason I'm running for president of the United States is because I know we can do better. We can bring this nation back. We can restore the American economy. We can secure our border, and we can stand for the God-given liberties that have always made this country
I
strong.
want to know who told Mike Pence, hey,
Amen.
it's a good idea
Well,
if you to run the
and we can
president.
certainly do better,
Because
that's for
whoever
sure.
gave him that
So I
advice,
have to ask you, since you were a witness to and in some ways unintentionally a participant in one of the most widely covered events in American history, January 6th, what was that? Do you think that was an insurrection?
Well, first, look, can I just take a moment
Up,
just to
DJ
say thank
Fruit
you to my
Loop?
family leader, to Bob Vanderplatz and the whole team here.
I remember this. We
To
went
our
over
friends at
this
Blaze TV,
because he
including
avoided
Tom
fucking
from
answering the
Quebec.
question.
We're standing here on a historic day in Iowa, when in just a few short hours, Governor Kim Reynolds would take to this stage and sign into law
Look
historic
at Tucker. He's like, this
protections for the
motherfucker's
unborn.
dodging
And I
this.
think all the members of the family leader here in Iowa prayed and worked and fought to bring us to this day. And it's an honor to be with you all. It really is. Now, as to that day, let me just say, all I know for sure, having lived through it at the Capitol, is that it was a tragic day.
Do you have PTSD? One person died at the Capitol that day,
I've
by the
never
way.
used the word insurrection, Tucker, over the last 2 years, but it was a riot that took place at the Capitol that day. I saw firsthand where they'd evacuated us down to the loading dock below the Senate chamber, police officers that, as the day wore on, were streaming through 150 law enforcement
So it's
officers that
funny.
were assaulted.
So he's been there telling his accounts. He has all the video evidence of what happened at that point. So you know he's like looking at Pence like, yeah, you're a lying piece of shit.
Obviously, the tragic loss of life ransacking the Capitol that occurred. But I really do believe that a day of tragedy became a triumph of freedom. And I'll always believe that by God's grace, I did my duty that day under the Constitution of the United States of America, and our institutions held.
I mean,
When
he's
you say
not
the
wrong.
Tragic loss of life. Who are you referring to?
Babbitt.
Obviously, Ashley Babbitt would come to mind immediately.
That's the only person.
What do you
When
think
I
of the
think
fact
of
that
the-
she was shot?
Well, I just think it was a tragic moment.
What do you think
without
about it?
question. But I have to tell you that seeing people assaulting law enforcement officers,
Good deflection.
smashing windows, breaking
Gotcha.
into the Capitol building. It
Air Force
infuriated
veteran
me.
Ashley Babbitt, by the way.
And it's very likely that the restraint that was shown by law enforcement officers saved lives that day. But I think it's important that we hold those accountable who perpetrated acts of violence and vandalism in our nation's capital. But I'm still waiting for equal vigor and equal prosecutions to be brought on those that brought hundreds of BLM riots to cities across America.
Oh, just make sure you added that part for the clap.
And the truth is, we don't make progress in this country by walking away from the rule of law. We uphold the
Obviously,
rule
the
of law, and we apply
opposite
it
of
equally
progress is
fairly.
Congress.
And I think that holding those accountable that rioted at the Capitol that day is right and proper. But I also believe that people that engaged in the hundreds of riots over the summer of 2020 literally burned out family businesses and communities.
And that's the thing. I don't know why whoa, that was a lot of typing. Correct. Yes, they focus on January 6th because that's all they have. If they could focus on anything else that the right has done that would remotely come close to that, they can't find one. And the fact that, they illegally detained a lot of these Americans for what? To make the spectacle look good because, everyone was in on it except for obviously the chief of police that day. And I did a segment on him a couple weeks ago, so you can check that back.
And also cost lives.
Yes.
Must be held to account.
Amen. So we spent, when the BLM riots happened and the riot in front of the White House that injured more law enforcement personnel than January 6th, we spent a lot of time talking about why those rioters were mad. They were mad about systemic racism and the death of George Floyd, et cetera. Why do you think the people who swarmed the Capitol on January 6th were mad? And why haven't we talked about that?
Because they were tired.
Well, first off, I would tell you that I think the January 6th committee was a partisan committee in the Congress of the United States.
Well, no shit.
And it failed its historic mission of bringing the facts forward.
And wasted millions of dollars.
And I know your commitment to bringing all the facts to the American people, Tucker. And I know we're grateful for that. The truth of the matter is, as some members of the staff of the January 6th committee said after it adjourned, they spent all their time focused so much on one individual and on placing blame that they spent very little time focusing on law enforcement failures that happened that day and intelligence failures that happened that day. And I hold to the view that
actually those failures don't exist because everything was being stifled by the government, the U.S. government. Nancy Pelosi didn't want the National Guard called up. The National Guard was fucking across the street waiting for, the call. But, they don't want to do that. Why would they? Mayor Bowser didn't want to do that. They didn't want it to look bad. They didn't want the optics to look bad if the National Guard was out there. But they didn't worry about that in Kent State.
View that we can never let this happen again. We can never allow the capital of the greatest nation on earth to be subject to a riot for any purpose, for any motivation. And for that reason, we need to understand why law enforcement that day was not better equipped.
Yeah.
We also need to understand politicians work for us, not the other way around.
And I believe that in time we'll have those answers.
What's up, James?
But I wonder, though, again, about motives, since these were, and I'm not excusing any act of violence ever anywhere, including on January 6th. However, they were American citizens. Most of them didn't commit acts of violence, and they were really mad. And they were mad because they thought the election was unfair. Right. And I wonder why more time hasn't been spent by either party reassuring Americans that our elections are real, that all votes are counted, that the electronic voting machines, which no one seemed to trust 10 years ago, now are infallible, why mail-in voting is a good thing. Like, why doesn't anybody try to reassure the public that the mechanics of voting are legit?
Because fear sells better.
Do you think the last election was fair?
Well, as I said on January 6th,
DJ Fruit Loops. That's exactly why we had the U.S. Revolution in the first place, for shit like this. Government became too big, and we're like, wait a second, fuck that. Then again, that's the way the Civil War was, and let's see, the federal government actually won that one.
to the Congress and have said many times since. There were irregularities in the 2020 election. There's no question. There were about a half a dozen states that changed the rules of elections in the name of COVID.
Yep.
And that
Speaking of
undermined
COVID,
public.
glad he brought that up. Masks are coming back, ladies and gentlemen. Masks are coming back. Universities are already doing it. There's a unit, battalion commander said his entire unit had to wear it. They're coming back, guys. They're coming back. Fake Mask USA.
Our elections.
I think that's the new
Now,
name.
At the end of the day, we brought more
If
than
there's
60
not, James will
lawsuits,
tell you.
states engaged in recounts. And when states ultimately certified and courts upheld those changes in virtually every instance, and ultimately we were able to determine that the changes, there was no evidence that the changes had
You're safe here.
changed the outcome of the election in any way. I knew that my duty was clear that day. But candidly, as I've said before, President Trump's words that day were reckless.
How?
I believe whatever his intentions in that moment, it endangered me and my family.
We need to march on the Capitol. Wait, that wasn't Trump.
I believe history will hold him accountable.
That was Ray Epps.
Just as the law will hold everyone that engaged in acts of violence.
But may I just to the rest of us who weren't there, who were just participating or trying to in our democracy, 10 years ago, Democrats said, look, electronic voting machines can never be secure. And of course, that's obviously true. Anything electronic can be subverted. Real countries don't use electronic voting machines.
Totally okay with being a terrorist and a racist.
Ours can have
love my flag and I love my country.
You're participating in that everyone can trust.
Well, I believe we can, but I welcome the fact that since 2020, Republican-led states around the country have enacted election integrity reforms. I'm somebody that believes that, and Indiana was the first state to do this. I'm somebody that believes that you ought to be required to give a picture ID when you go in to vote. We ought to have voter ID in every state in America.
That's should be something everyone should agree with. Well, then again, maybe it's not something people can agree with. I know there's states already, cities and states, and they're getting state elections now where they're allowing illegal citizens to vote. I don't know why I said citizens. Illegal immigrants. They're allowed to vote. New York City, they can vote in local elections. I think whatever Richmond Whitmer, her state is allowing it. And I think there's one more. I'm just not really sure.
In Indiana and elsewhere, they produce paper ballots. Recounts were taken in states around the country. And I think it's absolutely essential that we do everything in our power to restore public confidence in the one person, one vote principle at the heart of this republic.
Why not just get rid of electronic voting machines and call it a day, and then we don't have to debate it?
Answer the question, Mike.
Well, I would certainly be open to that.
Is there a downside?
But what I believe, Tucker, is that states govern elections.
Exactly.
States ought to conduct our elections. In fact, our founding fathers debated this at the Constitutional Convention. It was one of the reasons why I believe that my duty was very clear on that day. Despite the fact that my former running mate continues to hold the view that I had the right to overturn
your former
the election.
boss.
I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. I had no right to reject the return votes that day. And Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024.
Wait, you returned rejected votes?
But this principle of state control of elections is absolutely vital. I mean, we've got to, one of the very first bills that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden brought to the floor of the Congress was a bill to nationalize our elections. It's what essentially brought me off the sidelines. It was the first thing I spoke publicly against after I left my...
It's funny you mentioned the national elections. I know for the first free election Iraq had in fucking forever, it was basically a federal country run because everybody had to go get fingerprinted to let everybody know they're voted. But the security for every voting point in that country was secured by military personnel, U.S. military personnel. That's the kind of voting they want us to do. Mein Führer, you will line up, you will vote for this guy. And always Russian, German, Ukraine. Technically, you got Ukraine, Russian, and German. Or Nazis, whatever. You're not listening.
Role as vice president of the United States, because you never want Washington, D.C., or any one person in Washington, D.C. deciding our elections. And the truth is that one of the ways that we govern the integrity of our elections is by letting states like Iowa, like Indiana, every state across the country to be able to conduct our elections. So if states were interested in going to all paper ballots, I would cheer them on. If states were willing to use, with strong integrity, continue to use electronic machines, I'll cheer them on.
But no state
States should govern elections in America.
So you're saying they
now
should do mail-in
and
votes
always.
for the
I
entire
think it
state?
seems like a good idea. It's a constitutional principle. That seems right to me. But in point of fact, no state, including ones with Republican governors, has really done anything about election integrity.
They sure
They have
haven't.
not restored elections to what they were in, say, 1992, where you have paper ballots,
One day, same day voting.
on the day of the election, and you have voter ID. Like, these are super simple, but no one's done it. Why?
Well, I think there's plenty of opportunity to advance election integrity reforms around the country. As long as we don't intrude on the independence of states to conduct elections and to manage their elections, there are ways the federal government could provide resources and encourage reforms. And if I'm president of the United States, I promise you,
That's never
we'll
happened.
fight every day to restore public confidence in elections.
You might as well go back to Indiana and hang it up.
Thank you for that. You've issued a bunch of public statements about your views on foreign policy, which are definitely within the mainstream of Republican views, as far as I can tell. You recently met with Zelensky, according to news reports. And I'm wondering if during that meeting, as a prominent Christian leader, which you are in addition to your political views, you broached the question
I believe paper
of his
ballots
treatment
is
of
the best
Christians
way to go,
within
DJ.
Ukraine. The Zelensky government has raided convents, arrested priests, has effectively banned a denomination, a Christian denomination, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church within Ukraine, has persecuted Christians. And I wonder if you raised that with him.
I did raise the issue when we were there.
Did you?
And I raised it with the leader of the Orthodox Church when I was visiting Kyiv, and asked him about concerns about religious liberty. He assured me that the Zelensky government in Ukraine was respecting religious liberty, even while recognizing that there were very small elements of the Russian Orthodox Church that were being utilized for the purpose of advancing the Russian cause in Ukraine, and that they were taking steps to hold them to account. But the leader of the church at St. Michael's in Kyiv told me personally that he believed that the Zelensky government was respecting religious liberty. And I must tell you, other than the sanctity of life, there's no higher priority in my life than preserving the freedom of religion in America and championing religious liberty around the world.
Every religion, right, Mike? Just making sure.
It's very clear that the Zelensky government has arrested priests for having views they disagree with. That's not consistent with religious liberty. It's an attack on it, and we're funding it. And I'm just wondering how is it, and I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but I sincerely wonder how a Christian leader could support the arrest of Christians for having different views.
Well, what I can tell you is I asked the Christian leader in Kiev if that was in fact happening, and he assured me that it was not. People were not being persecuted for their religious beliefs.
Were you standing right next to Zelensky when you asked him?
He said
Let me take a break here. I know we disagree on this strongly.
You said
but
you're taking a break.
I respect your right to your opinion on Ukraine, and I trust you'll respect mine. Look, I've been to Ukraine now twice. My wife and I traveled into Ukraine a month after the initiation of hostilities. We traveled then with a group called Samaritan's Purse, providing Christian relief to the millions of Ukrainians, women and children of every age that had to flee that country in the face of the unprovoked Russian invasion that began a year and a half ago. I did return, took an 11-hour train ride into Kyiv, also again with Samaritan's Purse. We not only met with government leaders, but we met with Christian relief workers. We're literally rebuilding homes of people in small towns, little hamlets, that a year ago were being shelled by Russian tanks, while the people in that community were just sitting in their homes.
So Russia tried that in a small town?
The truth is, what I saw was not just evidence of war, but I saw evil. And I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Would you, may I ask, would
Yeah,
you,
look at those boos.
I believe you have a good faith position on this, and we have disagreements on it, but I want to just, I can't let you elide over the question.
What's up,
of
Rob?
Treatment of Christians.
I know, I heard
And
that
would
again.
you be,
Tucker.
well, no, but hold on. Would you, would you
problem
be
is
willing?
you don't accept my answer. I just told you that I asked the religious leader in Kiev if it was happening. You asked me if I raised the issue, and I did.
And I
'Cause
said,
you
I
said
don't
you
raise
did.
it
With the
incorrect.
Ukrainians, and I was told that there are religious leaders who have been working with the Russian military that is murdering people by the thousands.
Okay.
I mean, Tucker, look.
Wait, but hold on. Don't you think?
Let me
it's-
explain to you what I think our national interest is there.
I would think you would have greater concern for religious liberty in Ukraine. And I'm surprised
I
by
told
your
you I raised the
comments.
issue of religious
No,
liberty.
you spoke to one person who's clearly
I didn't
on
say I
one
spoke to
side
one
of it, and there are many, many news reports that are not disputed by anybody that
Where, in Tennessee? I mean, I'm not saying Tennessee because I know we had floods too. I'm honestly believe that. I believe that y'all didn't get that money.
Right.
many
It was
Christians have
redirected.
been arrested in Ukraine. And I'm merely saying I may not agree with their views. I'm not Russian Orthodox.
Okay.
But you can't arrest clergy for having different views, period.
Different
Because
state.
If you do,
Right,
you're
one right
violating
above
the
the other.
basic tenet of
Look,
religious
I
liberty.
won't look. I want to be clear with you. I won't stand by it. I won't stand for it. If people are being persecuted for their religious
Okay.
beliefs, I won't stand for it. In any country with which the country of our nation is supporting or our
Guys,
allies
just
are
rebuild.
Yes.
period, paragraph. But let me say to you, our
Or
national
move.
interest in Ukraine, I believe, is born of the fact that I spent 10 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
I
in the
spent
House of
20 years in the
Representatives. I
military.
spent 4 years as vice president.
So does that
I've
make
met
me more of
Vladimir
an
Putin.
expert than you?
Let me tell you, if Vladimir Putin overruns Ukraine,
He would have done it already.
I have no doubt that in a short period of time, that Russian military is going to cross a border of a NATO country
I got you.
that our armed forces will have to go and defend. You know, I started
Why do we
this
have to?
morning at Rosie's in Zionsville, Indiana, with my son, Captain Michael J. Pence in the United States Marine Corps. My son's a fighter pilot. My son-in-law is a Navy fighter pilot. And I'll tell you what, I never want to see American armed forces in Ukraine. I want to give the Ukrainian military what they need to fight and
Son
repel
of a
the Russian
bitch.
invasion. I think we need to stop them there so that our men and women in uniform
Let
never
fucking
call
NATO
upon
do
to
that
stop
shit.
that Russian military when they cross a border that we would have to defend.
So you would oppose Ukraine entering NATO? Because that would, of course, immediately require us to go to war with Russia, which you oppose.
You know, I said very clearly that Ukrainian entrance into NATO should depend on when the war is over. And I made that clear with President Zelensky that that was my view.
I don't even know why that's still an
And
issue.
what I
The
understood,
Budapest
speaking to
Memorandum
President
says it
Zelensky,
should
that
not
we needed
happen.
to
It
be
was signed by a bunch
if
of
we
these
were
countries.
to allow Ukraine to join NATO today, then the obligations of the NATO Treaty on Mutual Defense would initiate immediately, and we'd be pulled into a conflict. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
But
you
I
do. You just said you
believe
did.
that after the war is won,
You're part of
and
the military
over,
industrial complex. You just
that
realized
welcoming
his sons are
Ukrainians
officers
into
in the
NATO,
military.
embracing them with open arms in the West is in the interest of our security and of our nation in the long term. And let me also say,
Wait, can
I
I
think
ask
this
one
fight is
specific
also,
question?
I think this fight is also about China, Tucker. I know we don't talk about that enough. I know a lot of people say, and you may hear from some other candidates in this race, that we ought to be focused on China. Well, I gave the first major speech in our administration, changing administration policy on China. We called them out. We imposed tariffs.
Oh, I'm out of
We
cookies. Did you
rebuilt
want
the
one?
military. I mean, in a very real sense, we were tougher on China than any administration in the modern era had ever been. But I really do believe that by giving the Ukrainian military what they need to repel the invasion, we will also send a deafening message to China that America and the free world will not tolerate China's military ambitions in the Asia Pacific, or their intention that becomes more clear by the
The thing
day.
is, China has a pretty big fucking military. But what they said about Russia is at any point, Russia can snap their fingers and they'll have 1.4 million troops on the border of Ukraine and Russia. Our military only has 1.2 million service members total. China and Russia would crush us in a matter of seconds. They'd have to do a draft
against Taiwan or any other place.
But
I really do believe peace comes through strength. And the United States of America needs to continue to project strength. But let me say one last
But
thing.
we've run out of ammunition, so we're sending in cluster bombs. So because we've sent our ammunition to Ukraine, which has not yet won the war, whatever that means, no one has defined it. But isn't that prima facie evidence that we have become weaker militarily?
because China has a lot of the materials we need as far as technology-wise. The materials for microchips and a bunch of other stuff that runs all our computers, our everyday things, my TV, the microphone I'm using, those materials come from China. And the batteries for all these electric cars, they're mined. The materials of that are mined also in China and Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo's mines are owned by China.
By our support from Ukraine, or how am I missing something?
Well,
we're out of ammunition, so we're sending cluster bombs.
Well, first off, since Joe Biden took office, he's been working to cut military spending. And frankly, the recent debt ceiling deal that was done, if they don't pass all their 13 appropriations bills, will result in a 1% cut in our military spending after inflation in 2025. Look, China is floating a new battleship every month in the Pacific.
What are we doing?
We don't need to rebuild our military. We need to build a military strong enough to meet the challenges America will face in the 21st century. And as president of the United States, I'll do that.
I don't think the illegal labs have anything to do with China because the U.S. funds similar labs all throughout Ukraine. That's another reason that the U.S. wants to protect them so much. The Ukrainian, the biolabs, the child sex trafficking, human trafficking, everything that they're doing right now is going to make, how do I say this? Ukraine is just being the money laundering place. Because there's really no reason that Ukraine should be as important as it is. What do they produce? Like 10% of the world's grain, which is kind of weird. I'll look that up later. What's up, nuts? But Ukraine, it's nothing but, I guess, a land grab because they have some minerals and those biolabs. There's no NATO or UN in Ukraine.
The
You
Pentagon
can do whatever the fuck you
because
want.
of the munitions and the material we have sent to Ukraine,
Yeah.
we're very low in
on
our stockpiles.
155.
Is that a concern to you?
Yeah, on the 155 artillery. And,
Okay.
I have no reason to
To
disbelieve it.
Vegas.
Look, it's the answer though is not to shrink from America's role as leader of the free world. The answer is to invest in our national defense.
Well, we need to stop being the
I
world's
really do believe
police.
that. Look, remember, in a year and a half, and again, we have a strong disagreement on
Well,
that.
I'm not sure we do.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know that.
Great if
I
we
remember I saw it the day it happened.
But let me say to you, we've made real progress there. Look, a year and a half ago, Russia had the second most powerful military in the world. Today, they have the second most powerful military in Ukraine.
Are you trying to make a joke?
All right, that's progress. That's progress, and that's a result of
I don't
what the
get
United
it.
States and our allies have invested. But let me say one thing
But,
about
well,
Joe.
I'm
Can I
sorry,
say one thing about Joe Biden on this?
Okay.
And I've been critical of him. Look, our administration came in, and the Obama-Biden administration had refused to give military support and resources to Ukraine. We ended that. We started providing Javelin missiles. I'll never forget standing in the woods a couple of weeks ago in a little town called Moshe, where
Wait, we were trying to fund them since the Biden administration or Obama administration, huh?
24 hours. And then the colonel looked at me and smiled and said,
Right?
and then the Javelin
Exactly.
missiles arrived.
That's why I didn't understand that.
And I said, we sent you those Javelin missiles. And he said, yes, sir, you did.
Got $400,000
We
pop.
provided arms to Ukraine so they would be better equipped for this moment.
But let me ask
When
you a
it
question.
came,
I'm sorry.
Joe Biden cut off military
my
spending when he came in. And even after that heartless, unprovoked invasion, which Joe Biden actually said, we didn't know what we'd do if it was a small invasion. I mean, he signaled incredible weakness, especially after that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And all along the way, the Biden administration has been slow in providing military support. Make no mistake about this. We promised them 33 Abrams tanks in January.
Yeah, I do, but
2 weeks ago,
not my
Ukraine, they
channel.
still don't have them. We've
My
been
channel's a
telling them
little
to
bit
train their
different.
F-16 pilots, but now they're saying maybe January we'll let somebody transfer some jets.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President. Have you? I know you're running for president. You are
Thank you.
distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse.
No worries, bro.
Over
No
the
worries.
past 3 years.
Yeah.
Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better.
That's why I
in
don't get
United
the
States.
50s and
And it's
1600 views,
visible.
because I don't
Our economy has
I don't do
degraded.
panel.
The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've
I
received
can.
tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough.
Did he say it
tanks.
yet?
I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
That's not my concern. Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before.
It's in that.
Well, it's not.
I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
He's running for president.
Tucker, I've heard that routine from
Thanks,
you
brother.
before, but that's not my concern.
It
I'm
actually,
running for president of the United States because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. And as president of the United States, we're going to restore law and order in our cities. We're going to secure our border. We're going to get this economy moving again. And we're going to make sure that we have men and
I
women
did,
on our
Ghetto
courts at
Gremlin.
every level that will stand for the right to life and defend all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. Anybody that says that we can't be the leader of the free world and solve our problems at home has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. We can do both. And as president of the United States, we will secure our border. We will support our military. We will revive our economy and stand by our values. And we will also lead the world for freedom under my administration.
yeah, that's never going to happen there,
Amen.
Mike.
Vice President Mike Pence, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
I don't know about you, but I wasn't really getting a warm fuzzy from Mr. Vice President there, which is why he was the very first candidate I brought up, because, like I said, I'm going from shittiest candidate in the debate to best candidate debate, in my opinion. Now, we all know, I think I already gave away who this one is going to be. It's a fat little motherfucker from New Jersey who, during the pandemic, was like, I'm going to shut down a beach, but me and my family, we're going to chill on that beach. Rules for thee and not for me. Ladies and gentlemen, Christie.
Conversation with the candidate continues right now.
Thank you for clicking on our extended digital conversation with the candidate, with our candidate, former New Jersey Governor Christie, Republican candidate for president. We've got 30 minutes commercial free. We're going to get to as many town hall questions as we possibly can. We're going to start off with Barbara Southard. Hi, Barbara.
First of all, Governor Christie, thank you for your support of Ukraine.
Watch the video I did earlier with Donald Trump. They actually have the Mexican politician who might run for president, and he said that if Trump and him get elected both, they will tackle a lot of the drugs and sex trafficking and all that kind of stuff. They've already said that. So if Trump and this Mexican guy get arrested, well, that Trump's getting arrested Thursday. If they both get in office, that's probably the best thing between U.S.-Mexican relations that would ever happen.
Ukraine, appreciate that. Well, what do you plan to do for us to reach our climate goal of net zero in 20?
With that southern border from Mexico, true. But this is what I see happening. If those two get elected, the U.S. military is going to be part of what helps secure those borders through southern Mexico and Yeah, exactly. They do come from South America, Latin America. But that's why I said I fully believe if that happens, our military will be down there helping secure that border.
2050.
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, I am someone who's in favor of an all of the above strategy. Because we can't disarm ourselves.
In 2050.
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, I am someone who's in favor of an all of the above strategy. Because we can't disarm ourselves economically while we convert to cleaner energy. And so we can't have our aspirations outstrip our innovation. So my best example of this, Barbara, is, California says by 2030, no new gas cars. And then I saw a month or so ago, Governor Newsom sent out an advisory in California that said, don't charge your electric cars tonight, you'll crash the grid. Well, doesn't help very much to have an electric car if it's not charged, right? So we can't have our aspirations outstrip our innovation. But here's one thing for sure. I am someone who favors a greater use of nuclear power. And the reason I do is I've watched the example in my home state. We are the most densely populated state in America. So 9 million people in a very small little space. And we have gotten 53% of our electricity annually from nuclear. We do it safely in the most densely populated state in America and have been doing that for over 50 years. Nuclear can really help us reach both reliability and to get down to net zero on carbon.
Yep.
We need to continue to support and develop wind and solar. When I was governor of New Jersey, we were the second largest solar producing state in the country.
But
you wouldn't have guessed it. Arizona was first. That's an easy guess.
So wind and solar, great ideas. But these windmills, like I said, whether they're on land or in the ocean's going to be even worse. What happens if something happens within the windmill where all the hydraulic fluids, the oils and shit just drop into the ocean? What happens then? We have a catastrophe that we got to clean up. Those windmills aren't small. They destroy the area under them because the vibrations are going to disrupt the wildlife. And then if you put them on land, they're going to hit birds. The same thing with oil. They kill the land around it. Solar panels, they emit the great. But when you have solar grids, all the grass under it's dead. And you got to cut out a huge piece of land. To save the environment, we're going to cut down all these trees and put these solar panels. Great idea, right? I want a congressional medal of what do the civilians get?
But we were number 2 when I was governor because I really felt like we should push the edge of the envelope on that. Because of how densely populated we are, we had a lot of space that we could put these reflectors on and be able to gather that energy. But we can't abandon oil and gas. And you see up here in New Hampshire in particular, the lack of natural gas being able to come into this, which is cleaner than oil, certainly cleaner than coal, not being able to get here because of obstructionists in New York and other states is, to me, wrong. We should use all this as we convert to something that makes sense. And I think we can reach our goals. And as I was mentioning before, we've lowered our carbon output by 1 billion tons a year for the last 10 years while still using all of these energy systems. If we go to greater nuclear, and Georgia's just opened the first new nuclear plant in over 40 years.
Fuck yeah.
This past week in
the
more.
State
of Georgia. I think it's very possible. And
your energy prices go way down.
And make it easier for states to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question
Because
comes
the
from
way,
Ben Bolger.
the way these things work, you can't overload a power grid for nuclear energy. There's a lot less likely to have brownouts. What do we want? Power. What I said, it's up to you. Each energy's different. Wolfpack's here.
Hey, Ben.
Governor, thanks for being here. My name is Ben Bolger.
Hello, Ben Bolger.
There's a lot of interesting people running for president. What is something that you can do that's unique that only you could do and no one else could do if they were elected president?
If elected.
Well, you can out-eat all the other candidates.
It reminds me of the late 70s, Ben. In the late 70s, you had a country where we had an energy crisis, we had runaway inflation, bad unemployment. We had the Soviets in Afghanistan, hostages in Iran, and an Olympic boycott. And the country felt dispirited. And we had a president then, and President Carter, who told us it was our fault. We had a malaise over us. And what we did at that point was turn to a Republican conservative from a blue state. And the reason why Ronald Reagan was so effective on the big problems of this country was because he was unafraid to negotiate and compromise with the other side to get things done. He worked on immigration and got a good immigration solution back in the 80s. He worked on Social Security, and the reason Social Security is still solvent today is because of the deal Reagan made back in the 1980s. I think my experience having a Democratic legislature for all 8 years that I was governor, I used to kid all the time that Mary Pat and I spent more time with people we couldn't stand than anybody in the entire state of New Jersey. But guess what? Those people were elected too. And if I wanted to get something done, I had to work with them. I take the philosophy that it's a lot harder to hate up close, and that the president needs to once again engage personally with the Congress and work with both sides to say, how can we get to compromise and accomplishment? And that's something that Ron DeSantis had no experience in Florida, dealing with a rubber stamp Republican legislature. Nikki Haley in South Carolina, a rubber stamp Republican legislature there. That's great. I wish I had had a rubber stamp Republican legislature. I really wish I didn't have this experience. Our state would be better off if I didn't. But when preparing for the presidency, this is an enormous asset.
I think if a Republican president does get elected, well, even if a Republican president doesn't get elected in this next election, it's going to be conservative heavy in the House and Senate. So it's not like if Christie gets elected, he will be able to rubber stamp everything for the presidency. He would love that. But he's never going to see it.
Asset that other candidates in this race don't have, let alone the candidates who have never run anything. And so,
talking about Vivek.
Once again, we've had presidents. Now think about it. Going back, Barack Obama, one term in the U.S. Senate, never run a thing in his life. We saw the results. Donald Trump ran a family business. Remember, the Trump organization is about 50, 60 employees if you don't count every cocktail waitress and greenskeeper. Okay?
I mean, those are
small
employees.
He had no experience running anything like the federal government. And Joe Biden spent 40 years in the United States Senate and 8 years as vice president. You don't run anything there either. We need to have a president again who has run things under difficult, adverse circumstances. And for a Republican, if you're looking for difficult and adverse, come to New Jersey. We got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
On that topic, Governor, one of the things that Republicans are still angry at you for was basically greeting Barack Obama when he came for Superstorm Sandy. It's remarkable in some ways that the anger hasn't abated by now, a decade later. But doesn't that indicate that it's going to be very hard for any president to engage in bipartisan cooperation?
No, it doesn't. And look, I wouldn't do anything differently if I had to do it all over again. We have one president at a time. My state had just suffered the worst natural disaster in its history and the second worst in the history of this country. And the president of the United States called me and said, I'd like to come and see it for myself. Is there really anybody in this state who thinks what I should have said is, no, go away. I don't want you to come. We'll go it on our own.
True.
No. And that wouldn't be being loyal to the oath that I took as governor. And the fact that there are some people who are still angry, there is no majority of people
as well
out in the field that way. And the angriest people are always the loudest people.
Not Biden.
As we know from Donald Trump.
Obama gave him a bunch of free guns that they stole from Americans.
I want to end this era of pointless anger in America. I get angry plenty. And I'm as tough as anybody in this race, if not tougher. But that emotion should be geared towards accomplishing something. Donald Trump's anger and where he's led our country is pointless anger. And that in 2012,
I'll admit
pointless anger.
I did not vote for Trump. I have not supported Trump either time. But I will tell you, our country was thriving. It was pretty close to what I remember from the future. Just kidding. It was close. But my favorite day in America, as sad as it is September 12th, 2001.
This anger. It didn't make the difference between Mitt Romney winning or losing.
Mitt Romney's a bitch
Certainly
anyway.
didn't. He was going to lose anyway. And the fact is that I did what I knew was best for the people who had elected me. And that's exactly what I'll do as president.
Shut down the
Next
beach for your own
question, Thalia
personal
Ford.
use.
Welcome, Governor.
Hi.
Governor.
Since 2000, George W. Bush is the only president to have won the popular vote. It's all
Yeah,
about the
it was-
Electoral
they
College
couldn't
to win the
figure it out.
presidency, but
The-
is it a
The FBI and federal government couldn't figure out how those weapons got down there.
concern that Republicans may not have their finger on the pulse of the majority of the American people?
You bet. And any Republican who's not concerned about it is stupid. It's that simple. And, the fact is that we have not, since George W. Bush, appealed
Why not?
to suburban voters, most particularly.
Honestly, I didn't start voting till I was in my 30s, maybe late 20s, but it's never too late to start. Okay. Well, like I said, this is all just an informational who's running for the Republican nomination, but I know a lot about a lot of these guys except for the guy who's coming up next. Yeah. As I said, we got like 5 more to go.
We have not.
And I know I
even
don't like
more
him.
specifically.
I didn't
appealed to suburban
when he tried to
women.
run first time.
And it's because I think of this anger and intolerance that we've been exhibiting. Most of the time, I think that if people feel like you won't listen to them, they're not going to vote for you. And that's why in my state, the first time I ran for governor, I won 60% of the independents. The second time I ran for governor, I won over 71% of the independents. The reason I did was because I listened, because I campaigned in those places and listened to people. And we have not been doing that as Republicans, and we haven't been doing it effectively. Or we show up really late and say, no, trust me. People don't trust you if you show up right before Election Day. They trust you when you go to the tough places where you may get booed every once in a while or asked a tough question. I'm not worried about any of that.
So there was an
Republican
interview.
in
Not interviewing. He was giving a speech where they literally fucking booed him, and I couldn't find like the full speech. So you know me, I'm not gonna like get a cutout piece. I wanted the full context, but for some reason it's hard to find now.
New Jersey, I got that all the time. But in the end, what happened when I ran the first time in a 3-way race? I got 48% of the vote. 4 years later, after doing a lot of tough things and going through a horrible natural disaster, I got 61% of the vote. And I think that was a referendum on the fact that I listened and I was unafraid to decide after I listened. That's what people want from a leader. And that's the road back to a majority of the vote in 2024. If I'm the nominee, I'll guarantee you today, I will get a majority of the vote, both in the Electoral College and the popular vote.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Hella Ross.
What the
Thank
fuck
you,
is
Governor.
he smoking?
Hello, Governor.
Hella?
Governor?
I am deeply saddened by the recent fatal stabbing of O'Shea Sibley,
Oh.
a gay Black professional dancer and choreographer who was simply dancing at a gas station in Brooklyn. As president, what qualities of yours can you tap into to offer to help to heal our nation and quell the level of hatred towards all minority communities that continues to exist and surface across our country?
I think the only way to do it is to show people your heart and your soul.
Huh?
And I'll tell you that where my heart and my soul is that every life is a precious gift from God. No matter how that life has evolved and developed, no matter what their race or their color is, no matter what their gender is, no matter what
Wait,
their
the video of
sexual
the stabbing?
orientation is.
I think I might have seen that too. Shit.
That every life is an individual gift from God to be treated with respect. And the president needs to be saying those things. And we have had too much over the last 8 years in particular of nothing
6 years.
but anger and hate words coming from the Oval Office. And Joe Biden is almost as guilty of it as Donald Trump is.
Almost.
And he's been reacting to that. And it's just wrong.
It was.
The president of the United States should be inspirational to the people of this country, to our greater angels, our better angels, and make them understand that every American, regardless of any of those differences, is someone that at the very, very least merits our respect. And hopefully merits our affection.
I'll have to go double check that video. It's probably on Twitter.
And no one's saying that anymore. I mean,
I can't
those are
play it,
easy
obviously.
words
There's
to
a stabbing.
say if they're in your heart. And they're in my heart. And I absolutely believe in the sanctity of every life that God has put on this earth. And when we do things like that, and we don't speak out against it because we think it may create a political problem for us, shame on us. And when Donald Trump stood up after Charlottesville and said there are good people on both sides, that sends the wrong message. I will tell you right now, there are no good white supremacists. There are no good Nazis. Sorry, they're not.
What about black supremacists?
They have hate in their heart. And so we need to speak clearly about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we do, we can help to lower the temperature in this country a little bit.
Right.
And focus us back on the really important things that we need to be focused on: improving our kids' education, stopping this rampant crime in our cities, making our country more affordable for people, and making sure that we make friends all around the world.
But how?
To fight against people like the Chinese Communist Party.
It's one thing to spew
the
all this.
theocracy in Iran, and the crazy man in North Korea, and the autocratic dictator in Russia, who Donald Trump calls brilliant and a great leader. Those words matter, and they lead to things.
If you
like
look
we
up
just
the
talked
definition of leader there, Christie.
Quick follow-up, Governor.
He actually
Let's say
is a good
Ukraine
leader.
wins the war and expels Russia from its borders, and the United States has a chance, like it had in the early 90s, to approach a different Russia, however that happens. What should the United States or the next president do to try to change the trajectory of Russia so you don't end up with the same situation over and over again?
Well, first is to put Ukraine into NATO once the war is over. They've earned it. And they, by the way, will be the most hardened, best trained military force in NATO after what they've just gone through.
They have been ever since they were
It depends
founded.
on who the new leader of Russia is, Adam. If you have an autocratic maniac like Vladimir Putin, who replaces Vladimir Putin, there's going to be very little the United States can do to combat that. I want you to understand, I was just there
in Russia
just last Friday. I went to the town of Busha.
Okay.
When
I
the
don't
Russians
understand.
invaded.
All these motherfucking congressmen, senators, nominees. I don't know why the fuck he was over in Ukraine. If it's really that big of a damn war zone, why are they all there? And they're all walking around just like with this fat ass, hands in the pocket, probably eating a cheeseburger, you know, that kind of shit. Oh.
Invaded there. The mayor told me about one particular street where the Russian soldiers went into every house, pulled the men out, gouged out their eyes while they were alive, tied their hands behind their back, and shot them in the head. And then went into the homes and raped the women.
I'll take shit that never happened for 1,000, Alex.
They went to the St. Michael's Cathedral on the top of the hill in Busha. They killed 160 people, civilians, and buried them in a shallow grave behind that cathedral and ransacked the cathedral.
Mass grave? Trafficking victims they were trying to hide? Victims from the lab? Huh. Russia did it.
And the mayor showed me a picture that a Reuters photographer had taken
Reuters.
of a 10-year-old girl who was dead on the street, been shot by a Russian soldier. In her hand was her leash with her dead dog at the end of that leash. She was out walking her dog and was shot and killed by a Russian soldier. 19,000 children have been abducted from Ukraine by the Russian army.
By the what army? Russia bad guys. Russia bad. because they're trafficking children and killing people and putting them in mass graves. Russia bad. We know it's not Russia. Hell, the biggest importer of fucking child sex trafficking killed himself in prison, while his associates, God knows where, is living it up with a little black book probably in the middle of nowhere floating in the ocean.
Stolen from their families and taken back to Russia to reprogram them to be anti-Ukraine. I met one of those mothers whose child was taken away from her.
Right.
They don't know where their child is, if their child's dead or alive, being cared for.
So how you know she's getting reprogrammed?
This is the regime that Ukraine is fighting. This is not a territorial dispute, Governor DeSantis. This is not something we should ignore, Donald Trump. This is something that America stands up against.
You guys realize he's all about being pro-war. He wants war, just like Pence wanted war. Or I want to keep American troops out. Well, when the war of attrition goes away, starts coming about, like supposedly there is, we got to step in, right? We're the world's baby's daddy.
And
it's
those
time to pay the
folks
child support.
Deserve and have earned our support. And they're not asking for one American man or woman to come there and fight their fight. They just want us to give them the weapons to help them win their fight. And that's what we need to do.
We've got an online question coming from Alyssa Anderson, who asks, how do you plan to address the nationwide teacher shortage?
Oh.
Look, I think that in both two areas, teachers and nurses, we have a shortage in both in this country right now. And part of the reason for that is because we are asking too much of them. You know, teachers now these days are being asked to be everything. Not only a teacher in the classroom, a counselor, an overseer, a substitute parent during the day.
No.
Teachers need to teach, and parents need to be even more involved in their kids' lives. And so I think part of it is to say to teachers, we want you to focus on what your job is, and we're going to help relieve you of these other duties. But secondly, it is to make this education to become a teacher more affordable.
I feel it on the bus drivers, that's for sure. I'm glad my kids
The cost of college
drive.
education is out of control, completely out of control. And it's hard to justify taking out some of the loans that people have to take to pay for this education to then become a teacher. And so we need to crack down on these colleges and universities.
I know there's a lot of institutions that will pay to put people through college to be teachers. The Army does. It's called Troops to Teachers. Damn. That bad in Kentucky? I just know our buses run late.
And I have a plan to do that, who are charging exorbitant amounts way above the rate of inflation for an education that can help prepare a teacher to get in the front of that classroom. We're pricing ourselves out of that market.
Next question comes from Dina Berger.
Welcome, Governor Christie.
Thank you, Dina.
My concern is the high price of medication. Drug prices have really gone out of sight. And I'm wondering what you would do to lower those prices and also eliminate some of the ads on TV. If you've watched TV one evening, 3 to 5 ads for drugs. How can we eliminate those and get our prices down?
Well, you have just picked up on one of my pet peeves, which are those TV advertisements. Look, if there is a man in this country over 55 years of age who doesn't know there's a little blue pill they can take, they're lost, okay?
Really?
We don't need another ad.
I mean, that's a lot better than most schools would do. That's interesting. That's actually good that your school does that.
Advertisement for that. Every different drug. I want to learn about these drugs from my doctor, not from television. How do I know whether that's the best drug for me? Because they're saying it on TV. It makes no sense. And they spend too much money on it. And that
I understand.
money
When I go to the doctors, I already tell them, hey, this is my issue. This is what I found. And this is the best drug for me. What do you think? And they'll go, looks good. No problem. And that's sometimes the VA actually does because they don't want to do their job. They just say, oh, yep, he sounds right. But the military hospital, same shit. I think of tests that they don't even think of.
Could be used to lower the price of drugs. Secondly, we have something that a lot of people know about called physician or prescription benefit managers.
Yeah, I heard.
They are the
I didn't know that was going on in Kentucky. I know that was going on in some places.
And you. So here are the drug companies, and in many of the top line drugs, they give 60 and 70% rebates on the list price. And you know who takes 70 to 80% of that rebate?
Politicians?
The middlemen, the prescription benefit managers. I will tell you this, I don't know what purpose they serve in this country. And if I were president of the United States, my view would be they need to be gone. Those rebates that the pharmaceutical companies give should go to you, not to some middleman who pushes paper and gets the drugs from one manufacturing place to your drugstore. We need to control the price of the way that's done, because that brings no value to you at all. Because what I'm concerned about is if we clamp down even harder on the pharmaceutical companies, that will wind up stunting innovation. And you know, we get the best drugs first in this country that help to extend and improve life because they're developed in this country and paid for
not Germany
by the American consumer. We don't want to get fifth in line. So we need to figure out the way to squeeze that out. I think the TV advertising, which we never used to have before and then was permitted. So it was permitted by law, can be prevented by law. And these prescription benefit managers need to go. Those are two ways that I think we could really bring prices down and get those rebates that the pharma companies give already and get it directly to you, not to the people in between.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another online question that might be a bit of a parallel topic here, but Dylan Gray asks, what is your plan to fix the broken VA system and get New Hampshire veterans the proper care they deserve?
It's to supplement the VA system. And I think that every veteran who is honorably discharged should get a health card that allows them to go to any doctor they want, any hospital they want.
What?
The VA system is a well-meaning system that does a lot of good in this country. So I don't want to run the VA system down. There are good, hardworking men and women who work at those VA facilities every day who are trying to do the best they can, but they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by the demand in the system, Adam. And so we need to supplement it. And, you know, as we talked about before regarding Medicare, we need to allow these folks to access a system at a younger age after they've left the armed forces that allows them to go to the doctor they want and the hospital that they want. That's the way to do it. I know President Trump was up here yesterday saying he's going to build a new VA hospital right here in New Hampshire. Complete baloney. He's going to build that hospital the same way he built that wall on the border between the U.S.
You can thank liberals for that. That governor up there too. Oh, the fuck's that motherfucker's name? Which is weird because that's one of the biggest exports from Kentucky besides weed is coal.
In Mexico, okay? He's coming up here and lying to you to try to buy your vote. He's a charlatan.
Huh?
Understand it. It's the truth. If he thought that a New Hampshire Veterans Hospital was so important, how come he never spoke it until yesterday? He was the president of the United States for 4 years. Where was he? Now when he wants your vote, he comes back and puts a shiny object in front of you.
He started getting the VA, right?
Ever happen. The same way his wall never happened. The same way his balanced budget never happened. The only people who make money when Donald Trump is president, their last name is Trump. They're the only ones who make money under Donald Trump. Remember that.
On the merits, though, Governor, is a full-service hospital a good idea for New Hampshire?
I don't know. Because I don't know whether or not the cost of building a new hospital and the amount of access that it would provide to people and the level of care it would provide. What specialties are in the hospital, Adam? And are they supplementing what's already available through the other parts of the system? If we give people access to the medical system we already have built for every other citizen, and we give veterans access to that,
and stuff
we know they're going to get the care they need then. The same way every other citizen who has access to insurance or Medicare or private insurance gets access to that care. And that's exactly what our veterans deserve and not a nickel less.
Next question from Maura Carroll.
Thank you for being here, Governor.
You're welcome.
I'm sure
Ouch.
when you were governor of New Jersey, you worked closely with many local officials.
Sure did.
And I've heard it said that the level of government that gets things done is local government.
Right.
So my question to you is, as president, what would you do and what policies would you support to ensure that the federal government is
It's
assisting
limited.
local officials in carrying out the really important roles of public safety,
No.
infrastructure maintenance, planning, recreation, zoning, and the like?
No.
Well, the first thing on recreational planning, zoning, and planning, stay the hell out of your way. Okay. Don't be imposing things through the EPA and other things that make your job more difficult. Now, on infrastructure, we just passed a bipartisan
Holy
$1 trillion
fuck.
infrastructure bill. Yet we have the former mayor of South Bend implementing it. Now, look, I've been to South Bend. Okay. I've had 2 daughters who have gone to the University of Notre Dame. One who's there now, one who graduated in 2018. If the roads in South Bend are any indication of how well Pete Buttigieg can do,
I was going to say, that's Buttigieg's
he should
area.
resign tomorrow. All right. And so we need
Pete Buttigieg is the guy who got maternity leave for a child he adopted, all while the trains in East Palestine were like leaking shit into the water and the air, burning people's eyes. But forget about that. Apparently, they're not. They're taken care of, right?
Transportation. Who's going to make it easy for you to access that money? We passed it a year ago. I don't see any of the money anywhere. And you look at what it's like to travel by air this summer. It's outrageous. Where's the investment in the FAA? Where's the investment in more air traffic controllers? Where's the investment in improving airports? The money is there. We've appropriated $1 trillion, but we have people who don't know how to run things. So the best way I can help the localities to get the money for their roads, their bridges, their local tunnels and airports is to put someone competent in charge of the Department of Transportation to say, here's the check, show me what your plans are, approved, move, and let you run it.
No, because
let
the
you
natives
decide which roads you should
get a lot
pave,
of support
which ones
from
you
the federal
shouldn't,
government.
which bridges need improvement and which don't.
I said natives,
and the
right?
federal
Not
government should
Nazis.
help you pay for it, but they should keep their nose out of it otherwise, in my view.
Just out of curiosity, Governor, did you ever encounter Mayor Pete in South Bend?
Yeah. In fact, my first day when I was moving, I was governor and I was moving my daughter into her dorm. This will show you what an ambitious son of a gun this guy is. I'm there, I'm moving, I'm like every other father, right? I mean, I had a couple of troopers, but beside that, like every other father, I'm loading stuff out of the back of an SUV, boxes. All of a sudden, this really young guy comes up to me and says, Governor, how are you? It's great to be here. Great to have you here. I want to let you know if your daughter ever needs anything while she's here, just let me know. I had no idea who this guy was. And he looked young enough that he could have been a student or like a graduate student there. And finally, at the end of it, he said, and I'm Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So here's my card. And if you need anything, I'm like, first of all, how the hell did he know I was here? How did he know which dorm I was in? And then I was unloading boxes. So yeah, that was my interaction with Mayor Pete. Giving me his card and offering to like help my daughter in some way while she was at Notre Dame. To the best of my knowledge, she never called on him for any help, but he was there to offer me help the day I was moving her in.
Next question from Marie Mulroy.
Yeah, hi.
Marie.
And I think you've touched on this a little bit, but over the last several presidential elections, almost every candidate says they're the one who's going to finally heal this divide, kind of reconcile the sides, and so that we can get back to a civil conversation. So my question is two-part. One, why do you think it has not happened yet? And secondly, what would you do differently to finally ease this tension that's in this country?
Well, the reason it hasn't happened is twofold. One, either they didn't mean it and they felt like the divide helped them politically, or two, they just didn't know how. And so let's take they didn't mean it part. You know, for some people, Donald Trump in particular, conflict, as we can see, serves him well. It helps him. So he wants more and more and more and more and more conflict, right? So you got to be aware not to.
I mean, the only president is not to start a war.
Second, on the don't know part, I mean, does Governor DeSantis sound like somebody who's looking to heal the divide? I mean, I just listened to him. Look, I don't know him. I really don't. We didn't serve at the same time with each other. As he was coming in, I was going out. So I don't know him personally, but I just listened to him. He sounds like a really angry guy. he's squinting his eyes all the time.
Do you want to go back to the
about
debates and
something,
see
like-
how you were
like,
acting?
So I'm skeptical, right? I'm skeptical that somebody who's that angry cares about healing the divide or has the ability to do it, right? And I think, quite frankly, because of the experience I had in New Jersey of working with the other side and keeping things together, it's not like we never fought. Of course we fought. But then when we fought, we got to the end of it. We made a deal, or we didn't, and we moved on to the next topic. The only person who I think sounds like someone who's interested in this, to be honest, is Tim Scott. And I think Tim has in his heart the willingness to want to do that. I really do. I don't know if he has the ability to do it because he's never run anything.
Why? Because he's black.
He's been a congressman and a senator. And I think you need to also combine those two. The willingness has to be in your heart, and you have to know how to do
that
it.
is combined.
And
You're
I think
confused.
Tim and I are the only ones who are using any rhetoric that would make you believe they have the willingness in their heart to do it. And I don't know if Tim has the ability to do it or
Have
not.
you
I'm
not
not saying
listened
he
to Vivek?
doesn't. I just don't know that he does.
You haven't mentioned him by name.
Governor, as we wrap
He
up,
took a
can you
shot at
name
him.
Any Democrats currently on Capitol Hill that you would envision yourself working with?
RFK.
Oh, yeah, plenty. I mean, Joe Manchin, obviously, is
He's
somebody
gonna run
he was my
independent.
mentor governor. When I got elected in 2009, he was the governor of West Virginia, and he got assigned by the Governors Association to be my mentor governor. And for the whole first year that I was governor, I got to talk to Joe. I called him on a regular basis to get his advice. He's a wonderful guy. Kristen Sinema, I think, is another person who's reasonable, who you can talk to and you can deal with. I know a guy like Josh Gottheimer, who's a congressman from New Jersey, Democrat, but I think a very reasonable one in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and somebody that I think is willing to sit and listen and reason and compromise with people. So there's three off the top of my head. And, you know, if we were going to have a quiz and you had a piece of paper, my guess is I could come up with 20 or 25, which is a start.
You got
Given that
time.
I've never worked in Washington.
You got time.
So then once I get there, though, my job is going to be, Adam, to make sure that I find out what they're about. Now, I might meet some people. I doubt AOC and I are having dinner together. That's probably unlikely. I'm going to keep
He
her
likes
at the
white guys.
bottom of the list. If I get to AOC, we're not doing well, I don't think. But
But if
I
you
want to get to know these people. I
AOC,
wanna
that's
get
a
to know
good
their
thing.
families. I want to get
Because
to know
that's the
what they care about, why they ran in the first place, what they're hoping to accomplish when they're there. Can I help them accomplish what they want to accomplish without violating my
he
principles?
just told you there's ones that he's
Once
not
you
going to
start
work
to
with.
do those things, and that's a lot of time and a lot of work. But when you get to know that, then when you pick up the phone and ask them for their help on something, it's harder to say no.
No, it's not.
Or you say to them, look, you know, remember that one thing you were looking for that you really wanted to do? I can help you do that, but you need to help me do this. There's nothing wrong with that.
Is that
That's
Joe
the way
Biden's art of the
government
deal?
should work when there are people of different opinions coming together to try to solve problems. So I do it the same way I did it in New Jersey. And I suspect it'd be harder. But you go, there's some tough Democrats in New Jersey. You go see them. I think I'd do well.
All right. Governor Chris Christie, we've hit the 30-minute mark.
Adam, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on
Thank
Conversation
you all
with
for
the
coming
Candidate.
today.
Well, you can see why I don't like him. That fuck. I mean, the only thing I think we can agree is on the veterans getting to pick wherever the fuck they want to go. Free, because we obviously know the VA is not up to par. And what was the other one? Nuclear energy. I agree with him on the nuclear energy one. So, point Chris Christie. Wow, I can't believe I just gave him 2 points. So Pence is at negative 300. Christie's at 2. Okay. All right, this one I really don't know much about him because he's the governor of North Dakota, Mr. Doug Burgum. Burgum. So we got an interview he did with a local Iowa news station. I couldn't find if he showed up to the same one that all the other ones did with Tucker Carlson. That Blaze TV did. So this is the only one I could really find. So we can listen to what he's got to say. It was also done 2 months ago, but he is on the stage for the debate. So
I am joined now by North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. He announced his candidacy for president this week. Governor
with her
Burgum,
nose?
thanks for giving us some time for us today.
Well, thank you, Mary. Great to be here on the show with you.
I think just to start, obviously you serve the people.
Just
of
dude
North
for
Dakota,
real.
But for Iowans, what would you want them to know about your resume and just what has, I guess, led you and your experience to where we are today?
Well, first,
he looks like one of the new founding
people want Iowans
fathers.
to know is I grew up in a tiny town in North Dakota of 300 people. We counted everybody that also was in the Good Samaritan home. So we could have 400 people, because then that way we were slightly bigger than Hunter, our tribal 6 miles away. But yeah, grew up in that small town, had an amazing life there, beautiful community. And then when I was a freshman in high school, my dad passed away. And that was, tough on all of us. I had 2 older siblings. My mom, widowed, mother of 3. She goes back into the workforce. But, that was a pivotal point in my life where you learn. But I saw how Arthur is a town where neighbors help neighbors. Everybody pulls together, and the families that supported me. And when my mom was working, I could, go next door and have dinner with, Helen Williams, and she'd make sure everything was, great. Everybody was just, supporting each other. And I think we talk about that being the best of America. And I see that all over Iowa, which is, you've got this, our country was really built on not a bunch of federal government rules and not a bunch of policies and not a bunch of people fighting over their differences, but people saying, hey, if somebody needs something, we step up and we help our neighbors. And I see that, wherever I go. But simultaneously, 2 things can be true. One, we can have a country where great things are happening that we're not hearing about, where people really care about each other and there's great communities. And then we could also have a federal government that completely overreaches on just about everything, buries the country in red tape, is completely wrong on economic policy, wrong 180 degrees wrong on energy policy, and really wrong on national defense, including the border. And those are the actual responsibilities of the federal government. So I would want people to know that, I grew up and I, believe in small town values. And from those humble beginnings, I got 160 acres of farmland from my dad. I literally bet the farm, became the startup capital for a little company, tiny software company, which became Great Plains Software, which I'm learning, people have heard of in Iowa because our last stop, hey, we're a customer. There's 300,000 Great Plains small business customers now around the world in over 130 countries. And when that company, by the time 18 years later, we were an overnight success story. We became part of Microsoft, but we had 2,000 team members. 1,200 of them were in Fargo, 400 rest of North America, 400 in the rest of the world. And those 1,200 from Fargo all came from little small towns like my hometown of Arthur. Kids from small towns, they know how to work, they know how to get stuff done, they know how to solve problems. And so that was, the beginning of what then was, I spent almost 3 decades in the software industry, got involved in building multiple other large software companies that were great global successes. And then in 2016, we had an open seat for governor in North Dakota, and as a complete outsider, decided to run. Told Catherine, the first lady, I said, "Don't worry. There's a poll that says I'm down 69-10. I'm not going to win. Have this out of my system in 6 months." And we went from down 69-10 to 6 months later, we won 60-40, and it's been a huge honor for us to serve the people of North Dakota.
Why are we looking at her?
And we've been just driving forward with a lot of focus on more efficient government, limited government, conservative principles, and we've been passed the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We achieved pension reform this year that been 3 decades in the making, and really are focused on driving our economy. We're on a path to having the highest GDP of any state in the nation in North Dakota. So when we're running now, we look at, I've experienced both as a business person and a leader of building companies, as an entrepreneur, and I've experienced as a governor, that the federal government just gets in the way. There's a very discrete set of things the federal government should do, and those things include the economy, energy, and national security. And so part of running is on the experience that I've had over a lifetime of creating jobs, and some of those jobs, I mean, working, on the ranch, on the farm, in the grain elevator. Some of these should all be on, the Discovery Channel's Dirtiest Jobs show. And I said, it would be good for America maybe to have somebody in the White House who's had jobs where you shower at the end of the day instead of at the beginning of the day.
And someone
we just can bring a lot of practical, small town, common sense values forward. And I think that's what our nation really needs right now.
And I guess going off on that, talk to me about maybe if there was a spark, an impetus of what led you to really want to run president. I mean, what obviously you've got the history in North Dakota of serving, but what is leading you to seek this office?
Well, I think one of the things in North Dakota, we're a big agriculture state like Iowa. We're a big energy state. And of course, Iowa's got ethanol. We've got ethanol, but we're also a huge oil and gas state. And also in North Dakota, we've got 2 big Air Force bases, and we've got
I didn't know that.
a big portion of the nation's
no worries, no
anti-ballistic
worries.
missiles. And so we're a state that's involved in national security. We're involved in energy, and like Iowa, we're helping to feed and fuel the whole world. So these are things that I've spent my life understanding, and these are the things that I feel like the federal government policy-wise is 180 degrees backwards on. So there just was a match between what the leadership that the nation needs right now and the experiences that I've been able to accumulate over my lifetime. And I think, again, technology is changing every job, every company,
It is,
every
actually.
industry. And one thing I've seen as
AI is
governor the
making it
last
worse.
6.5 years is that government itself is one of the most efficient operations, because in many cases, government doesn't have competition. If you're the only place, say, to get a driver's license, well, then you don't have to be good or fast or convenient. And we've had an approach where we just said, look, we've got to treat the taxpayers of our state like the customers they are. They're the ones that are paying for government. We've got to serve them. They have an expectation about service that you might working with any other consumer company, and government is so far away. So the technology background is another thing where I've learned, which is when people worry about government costs too much, I've seen you can take out all kinds of costs out of government. The first year we were there, we cut $1.7 billion of the North Dakota state budget out of a $6 billion budget. We cut it by $1.7 billion the first year, and everything kept running on time and services got better. So this
but there's
idea
not
that
a lot of
government has to
people in
grow
North
and grow and
Dakota.
grow, that's only true if you don't apply all the new approaches and processes and technology that every business has had to apply in those years. So there has been, I guess, a realization that at this moment in time, the needs that the country have are mapped.
Their population's
kind of uniquely against the
800,000.
skill set that I've been able to build over a career in my lifetime.
And I guess as we, look backwards, I know in previous elections you endorsed former President Donald Trump, and obviously now, an opponent of yours in this race. So talk to me if that's something that you believe, if you think America's ready for a change, in that office of maybe potentially moving away from former President Trump.
Well, I think there's a beautiful thing about democracy is the voters get to decide, and some of those most important
It's
voters
not a
are those
democracy,
that
though.
caucus here in Iowa, and I got a great faith in democracy. You talked about it at the beginning. I think the best of
What is
democracy
democracy in your eyes there,
places like
Doug?
Iowa and like North Dakota. And so we're very excited to be here. Iowa's such a beautiful state. We've had an amazing last 2 days here. First Lady Catherine and myself.
See, what Doug probably doesn't let you know is I just drew a blank.
We're going to be spending a lot of time here, and I think and so we're very excited to be here. Iowa's such a beautiful state. We've had an amazing last 2 days here. First Lady Catherine and myself, we're going to be spending a lot of time here, and I think the voters will get to decide whether or not they're
the
ready for a
democracy.
change.
So democracy is basically we elect the people, right? And they vote the way they think all their constituents want. It's ultimately their choice. In a republic, we pick the people we want, and they vote the way we fucking tell them to, not the way they interpret it. But I'm an idiot.
And something that has been kind of in flux here
Because I
in
don't do
Iowa, we've
panels.
got, our abortion law before our Iowa Supreme Court. I know earlier this year in North Dakota, you signed a strict restriction there with some exceptions. I guess when it comes to that, if you were in the office of president, is that something you see needing federal legislation on, or do you think that's an issue that should fall to the states and kind of for them to weigh in and choose those rules?
I think it's absolutely something that should fall to the states. I think the Dobbs decision, made that clear that this was a decision for the states, and that's where I think that decision should be made.
And I guess in the same vein, in North Dakota, we have similar legislation here in Iowa that passed throughout the last session that would ban gender-affirming care for those under 18. In the same vein of that, is that something that you believe there's a need for federal guidance on, or is again this an issue that you think states can handle?
I think that's an issue the states should focus on. Absolutely.
You mentioned ethanol earlier, and obviously that's a big issue for Iowans. Curious to hear your thoughts on any policies that you would like to seek, or any changes from the federal level when it comes to our production of that.
Well, I just think there's a big opportunity in the future in all renewable fuels, and whether ethanol, biodiesel. In North Dakota right now, we've got 3 new soybean crush plants, over $1 billion of investment going on into for biodiesel.
But the real big opportunity for this country is sustainable aviation fuel. We're not going to have battery-operated commercial flights flying across our oceans
sure as
anytime
fuck hope
soon.
not.
Batteries are too heavy. The rate of increase in their capabilities is only, a couple percent a year. That's been the same for the last 40 years. It's not like computer chips, which are on Moore's law, which are doubling in power at half the price every 18 months. Batteries just slowly get better, but they're heavy and they don't work well in cold weather. So airplanes, can be minus 60 at the elevation most commercial flights fly. So the weight ratio of a liquid fuel versus a battery for an airplane, for example, this is an area where it's decades and decades of liquid fuels are going to be required for a growing demand for aviation around the world. And the absolute best place to deliver sustainable aviation fuels is going to come from the heartland of America. And that's going to be it has the potential to double the size of the ethanol industry. And I think it's an exciting future because, of course, ethanol, you might say, oh, well, that's just for the farmers that are growing corn. Well, no, it increases the value of the crop. It increases the value of their land. That increases the opportunity for all the suppliers that sell to them, seed, fertilizer, all the inputs. That helps grow communities across the Midwest. Helps raise, the revenue that pays for schools and pays for healthcare and pays whatever. So when we can lift the economy through expanding an opportunity like ethanol, then everybody else benefits as well. And so I think, again, this is just an area where we would say, hey, we got to focus on innovation. That's what's driven America forward, not on regulation. And it's a great example. And I think the future is very bright for ethanol.
And I guess when we look towards the future and, the potential of this coming election, in your eyes, with President Biden's legacy, what do you see as the reason for that we need a change in that office? Or what would you point to as what you see as failures in that office?
How long is your show? Let's just start with the three we're focused on. Okay, on the economy, monetary policy, fiscal policy, the inflationary spending. I mean, inflation is the most cruel tax there is because it hurts the people the most that can afford it the least. I mean, it eats away at their ability, how do I pay my bills? How do I put food on the table? How do I put gas in my tank? All of that was completely predictable because of the trillions of dollars of excess spending that was just not required by this administration. And then on energy policy, again, 180% backwards. This administration, the Biden administration, has sent the State Department to Venezuela. They themselves have gone to the Middle East. Biden himself going to the Middle East.
And Saudi told him to fuck off.
Adversaries to produce more energy. Countries that often don't even have an EPA, they've got human rights violations. Let's have them produce more energy. He's not calling the governor of Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, Alaska, our big, the Republican governors of our energy producing states, and saying, hey, could you produce more energy, American energy, which would be better for the environment? Because if you care about the environment, you should have every drop of energy produced domestically, because in America, we do it cleaner, safer, and better than anywhere else. And you don't have to transport it here. Okay, which then also is bad for the environment to be transporting these fuels all the way to get to our country. We talk about energy independence. Every administration since World War II has said energy independence is an important goal for the country. Not this administration. They're trying to crush, they're trying to crush and destabilize all of our baseload electricity. They're trying to crush and through regulation, basically wipe out the oil and gas industry in the country. They're trying to make our country energy poor, which then again just enables our competitors. We're in a competition with China.
But we're
China's got
selling
the
them our
second largest
fucking
economy.
energies
They're
as well.
chasing us. We've always had the largest, most powerful.
I think we're
dynamic economy.
exporting more than we
We're not
keep
going to
for
be able to
ourselves.
maintain that position. We're not going to be able to solve our supply chain problems if we don't fix our energy policy, because that's the basis of what drives the cost of manufacturing and every other aspect. And then energy as relates to national security. Putin never invades Ukraine if we didn't have Western Europe buying all of the energy from him. I mean, so this is just completely destabilizing. And so whether it's the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was kind of a green light for Putin to go in, and then now, we'll sanction Russia. Well, then what does Russia do? Russia starts selling energy at a discount to China. So our policies become a win for Russia and China. So the whole
And
thing
other
is backwards.
countries,
So
though.
whether it's economy, energy, or national security,
They were able to buy
I feel like this
the rubles.
administration, in spite of the fact The best of America can occur every day in small towns, people taking care of other people. Think what the potential could be for this country if we actually had those three things headed in the right direction. We could lift up the life of every American. And when I'm president, that's what we intend to do.
And one thing we had wanted to ask you about, just that has, kind of been unfolding in the last couple of days, is the federal indictment of former President Trump when it comes to these documents. Just your reaction to that, or anything you'd want
Why does
our
that
viewers to
matter?
know.
Well, I think that
That has nothing to do with the election.
Clear
Well,
in America right now is
it
that
does,
a lot
but
of
it doesn't.
Americans have distrust in our systems at the federal level. I mean, they've got concerns about, our elections fair. They've got concerns about, are there two standards in the Department of Justice? One for Republicans and one for Democrats. Because
No, it's one for everybody and one for
set of
Biden's.
document issues. And I think when we have mistrust at a very fundamental level of our federal institutions, that erodes democracy at a whole. And one of the things that I know when I'm president, there's not going to be, the law will be applied equally to everyone. We have to rebuild the trust in government.
include,
Otherwise, we don't have a future as a country.
Rich people?
And I guess as a wrap up here, kind of the elevator pitch to Iowans of why should they keep their eye on you and consider you as their future next leader?
Well, I think if we look at where we are in the world right now, with the risks we face from, foreign adversaries, the challenges that we face, whether it's the border or cybersecurity or energy policy or the economy, you might say, hey, let's think about someone who's actually worked alongside of farmers and ranchers and small business people, someone who understands technology, someone who's built large businesses and has had global business experience for decades and
So you're
decades.
talking about Vivek.
And by the way, has also been a really successful governor of a state that is both an energy and a food producer for the world.
Right,
And
has
a
only
deep understanding of
800,000
national
people
security
total.
issues. You might say, hey, let's give that person a look. And
900,000.
so again, we would appreciate if people want to learn more about Catherine and myself, DougBurgum.com, check it out. And we would love to have the support. We're going to keep coming back to Iowa. We look forward to being part of the.
Well, that was Doug. I will admit I wasn't really listening because I don't know. I just don't think he would fit the part. Just by first impressions. Don't judge a book by its cover. I get it. But still. So I've got 4 more, but I'm going to hold off on them till tomorrow. So you guys can listen to me on the way to work if you guys do that. If not, it is what it is. But I'm not telling y'all how to think, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages, because as you can see, I don't think the same way as some of these candidates or other people you talk to, because different experiences, different world. But other than that, y'all have a good day. These are 4 of your candidates that you're going to be seeing tomorrow night, 8 Central. Wink, wink. But anyway, y'all have a good night. And if anything really important comes up, and I feel like I should do it tonight, I'll do it. But it has to be really something important, like, I don't know, Red Sox won the World Series. I'll go live for that.